Hey y'all. Hey,
Hi.
how are
How are
ya?
you?
Hello.
Good. How are you?
Good, good. All right. So let's cue it up for folks that are joining us live. I'm Delegate Sammy Brown, and we are officially starting what we are calling the State of Education. This is our show that's specifically dedicated to reentry education policy and what we're currently experiencing in the state of West Virginia. So let me introduce some good friends of mine. Let me kick it to Brittany Bartlett. Brittany Bartlett, tell them.
Hi, I'm Brittany Bartlett. Up until recently, I was a high school English teacher. I was president of my local AFT union. And I'm here tonight with the passionate, knowledgeable Sammy Brown and a bunch of other awesome people to talk about the state of education and what reentry plans look like, what concerns are, and what we can do about them.
Mm-hmm. Right on, sister. And then we've got our union brother in arms, Chris Mallory. Chris, tell him who you are.
Well, thank you, Sister Sammy Brown. My name is Chris Mallory. I work for AFT West Virginia in many different capacities, one of which is political director and full-time lobbyist. And my job and my goal are to make sure that our members and education employees are represented and advocated for. And my role tonight will be to do an overview of the reentry, the authority, and the processes, advocacy, and resources that you all can use to make sure that everybody's safe as we go about this in the next 2 to 3 weeks.
Very cool. I actually picked you for a very specific reason. Tell the folks watching what you did before you took on being political director.
So I've got a pretty rich history in terms of both politics and labor. I started in the labor movement. I was a graduate teaching assistant at WVU and became a full-time organizer for higher education for AFT in 2004 and 2005. Worked in that capacity for about a year for a project when we tried to get collective bargaining. Then went and moved and worked for approximately 8 years with United Mine Workers as international rep, health and safety and organizing, and worked in arbitration, grievance procedure, and member advocacy. Was the state director for ASME for 2 years, a very brief stint. Was stolen back by AFT, where I reside now in a national capacity. And so my background is both in the advocacy field and the policy field. And so what I'm doing now, I think, is reaching out and doing informational pieces so we can have a channel that I think that Brittany can attest to and that Sammy can attest to, that is grassroots power. And that is how we give you the information, how you help yourself, and you don't depend on calls from Charleston. You don't depend on calls from the central office. You can take the information, the knowledge, and do something with it. And there is power in that. So that's kind of the role that I want to fill out for my term here at AFT.
Absolutely. Long story short, Chris has seen some stuff, ladies and gentlemen. But why we're kind of attacking the issue the way we are tonight is, to me, I think it's an absolute shame that the last people to be consulted as experts when it comes to education policy or how this is all being implemented is educators themselves. And so every segment that we've got so far, that we've got planned out tonight, will be led by educators. What we're going to delve into now, though, is the old red light, green light policy. So that's our reentry plan that Jim Justice kind of laid out in one of his King Jim decrees, and kind of blindsided the state with a reentry plan. And then we were all left to wonder how to implement. And what that's done is led to thousands of questions. And I know it's not just here in my district in the 65th, but I know it's across the state. And so we wanted to hear from you specifically around what that policy looks like and what that actually means for folks in real time.
So the good part is that I can give you a brief history of how this came to be, and also tell you the impact and the way that we've tried to advocate and have teachers and service personnel's voices be heard at the levels that will impact policy and the reentry plan. But I do have to tell you that when we say where are we at, we are on a moving ship, and these metrics continue to change. So currently, we are on a color-coded scale statewide based on a hybrid and what I would go ahead and term as a stolen model from Harvard to try to continue a political motivated reason to return to schools. And I don't want to say what those are. Everything is politics are local. So having said that, as of right now, you've got green, yellow, orange, and red. If you are in the green, it's full on in-person learning in the schools. Yellow is also full on in-person in the schools with a caution, and then supposedly some kind of a plan. And when I say so-called, is because it's not been fleshed out yet. Is that they will track these local issues and then make decisions on the fly. So the orange and red would be an indication that you are not able to do in-person learning. Obviously, orange is a lower threat. Red is a hotspot issue. It's an outbreak issue. It's the worst case scenario. So what they've done is they started with the Harvard model and the metric on a per 100,000. And so it's basically an avenue in which you take a track and trace method for positive COVID cases within a certain precinct. In this case, we're using county lines. And then depending upon your ratio per 100,000, you make a metric plus or minus, depending upon your population, to say what your positive cases are per 7-day cycle. And then you act accordingly. And that's a scale that's done supposedly perpetually, but I'll get to that in a minute. So the background is that we have had since March or April. And the reason I say April is because March, everybody was kind of hands up in the air. We didn't have data. We didn't have kind of the lean in experts all in agreement on certain particular pieces. So April is the kind of the timeline we said, we got our health experts together, put out a guideline, a tool, a reentry kit, and we use it on the best science and the documentation and studies and research that was available. And so as we've moved, you've seen that what I believe is a politically motivated reentry plan that you can't just pinpoint and scale. It's calculated. We've pushed for additional funding, and you've seen after we push for additional funding, somehow that just happens to be on the next press conference and briefer that the governor puts on. But when we talk about passing the buck, this is really what I think is the biggest issue. Nobody wants to be the decision maker, and that's obvious. So we have a governor who ultimately has executed this supreme authority in whether or not we return to schools, but always has this messaging component that says it's decided locally. Okay, that is not the case. Nobody has challenged his authority in this. And then we have double speak between our superintendents and our State Department of Education to say who makes these decisions. And that's why we have really a problem and a dichotomy in who really makes these decisions.
Right.
So, authoritative with an authoritative piece per code, the State Board of Education and the superintendent have a certain amount of strict authority over the 55 counties. Separate from that, in a stated declaration of emergency, the governor does have very broad authority in West Virginia constitutionally.
Sure does.
When we say passing the buck, somebody has to be responsible. So if and when, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. We have outbreaks, we have problems, but we can mitigate those things and we can do this smartly. So when we talk about policy on return, we have provided with the State Department of Education reentry toolkit, and I'll share these links with Sammy, and then she can share those with everybody that requests them. And that is updated perpetually. So we will update those, but it's best management practices with scientists and our health providers to say, what are these metrics and how do we keep our people safe? So we don't have uniformity. And with that, I'll say that the people that are on the call today, they need to look at the West Virginia Department of Education's website. They do have a very good COVID page that will outline and show you all the particular requirements. Are masks required in class? Are they only in transit? The virtual and remote options for those folks, the schedules, the hybrid models. So if it's Jefferson County particular or EP people, I can pull those, but we'll share those links. So for my part is about how do we do this? How do we do this in a way that we protect our educators, we protect our parents, because this issue doesn't start and stop at the door at the schoolhouse. Our schools are a direct reflection of our community, and in terms of spread of a virus, this is kind of the epicenter. There are a lot of things that you could say are disputable facts. A natural fact is that when you have congregation of people in critical mass, you find that you have outbreaks, and that is undeniable. Okay, so what we don't want to say is that every county is not in the position to go back in person, but the caveat is if they make those decisions, and it looks like we're faced with that in the next 2 weeks, that they have the PPE that's required, they have the sanitization, and the biggest issue here is support, and that's professional development and support, and we don't have that. We don't have the health care professionals, the nurses, to come in to provide that kind of information for our classroom teachers and our service personnel. So with that, I'll say that there are abundance of resources that I'll provide in links. The biggest question that we get upon reentry are about accommodations. And so if the employee, and this could be direct for the employee or somebody that they're a general caretaker to, reside with, or have direct contact with on a regular basis, we have an accommodation set and recommendations that they have to work with the employees. But I want to put a caveat, and I want to be very clear, that is a case-by-case basis. It has to be backed up by both medical documentation from the healthcare providers of the employee and or the family, and also an affidavit statement that may have to be done through an attorney or a local magistrate. The other side is that with these accommodations, reasonably under the law, you have to meet the employer halfway. The employee versus the employer, we can't mandate, we can't tell them how to make these accommodations. We can only request these accommodations because you do have to, at the end of the day, you have to deliver a service. Okay, so we have form letters that we can provide to you all that will lay these things out, that are backed by both the federal ADA, and then also it's enforceable through the state EEOC through a complaint and compliance procedure. So the other is about paid leave. And so in the same context about requests for accommodations, the same provisions are also out there that if you fit in these categories and you're high risk, you're autoimmune, or somebody that you reside with or family members, you can get paid leave through an FMLA Act, and it's the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. And that provides for up to 80 hours of paid leave upon issues related to COVID. And so those are, if you are exposed to COVID, if you have to quarantine, if you're a part of the tracing and tracking, and they notify you through the local health department that you may have been exposed, those will cover the pay for all the employees in those circumstances. We also have a statement. We really need to get this fine-tuned from Clayton Birch, the state superintendent, that any COVID-related issues that would cause you to be quarantined would not be taken out of your sick leave, because you can't control the community just as much as you can't control the actions of the parents and the students that you're interacting with in terms of your schools. So we have scenarios out there. We'll provide federal guidelines, Q&As that are out there, scenarios, but it is, again, case by case. And there are certain amounts of rated or prorated pay leave that will cover you at a 2/3 or a maximum capacity daily that will carry you up and until December 31st. So I want everybody that's viewing or watching tonight to know that there is an avenue to protect you. There is an avenue to try to keep you as whole as you can, and while you protect yourself and your family. So the honest discussion about rights is that you have to request it. You have to be very fine tune in the way in which you ask for these accommodations or you notify people of unsafe conditions. The State Department has a hotline, an anonymous hotline number that I would advocate, and I'll share that piece here later with Sammy so she can disseminate that. But first is you have to report it. The other is when you ask for these things, you have to declare them in a memorandum, an email, a letter. We have to have these things form set so we can advocate you on a grievance procedure level, on an EEOC level, and then God forbid if we would have to do a circuit court action, we would have to have these documents to show immediate harm. So when we talk about reentry, we don't know until you tell us. And so the issue is I can't tell you that it's going to be rosy. I can tell you that we won't know until our teachers are all reporting in the buildings and that we have a fine set on the amount of students that actually show up and what those duties are. Separate and apart from that, I do want to tell everybody that's participating that and this is not a personal issue. This is an issue that we fought for and that Sammy helped us protect in our fights recently in education law. And that's the preference for virtual and remote options based on code 18A7A. And that is, if you are senior, and typically we're going to talk about folks that are more at risk, you will get preference when it comes to term of accommodations and remote and virtual options. Having said that, you have to balance the need, you have to balance the requirements to deliver the instruction. And so what I don't want to say is we can protect you and you can work from home. There may be circumstances where they say you are required to report to work and in the classroom, but we'll provide the checklist to say, is that classroom safe for you to work from? Okay. But in between, the idea is that we don't know until you tell us, until you report us. And this is a moving line, with the reentry. So we will continue to advocate. We'll continue to educate our members and our employees all through education on what their rights are. But just know this, these things have never happened. There is not a precedent in which we're focusing. We have case law in different jurisdictions. We have lawsuits currently filed in the state of Florida, Arizona, Texas, New York, Illinois, and California that we hope that will be adjudicated and that we can use as a little bit of a hammer behind our request. But please, please, please report these things to your union, whether it's AFT, school service personnel, WVA. When we talk about solidarity, we want to keep people safe. And as long as you communicate to us, we can help you. But we do need specifics.
Great. My end, so I'm sorry, guys. But I will say this. It sounds like from what you've expressed, Chris, that, and I know there are a few questions in the queue, that essentially they were like, if there's not scaled testing, we won't have the evidentiary support to really be a part of, red, yellow, or green. And I'd have to agree with that. But it sounds like based on what we're doing as far as membership, what we're going through as far as following guidelines set by legal precedent, that we're essentially asking you to report, and
Yes.
we can build that evidentiary support for you in order to make the case for you to work remote and virtual. Does that sound good?
Sammy, that's 100% accurate. And I can tell you that the issue and the problem become when you don't have clear direction, when you don't have clear leadership from the top down, you have 55 counties moving in 55 different directions. Yeah. I can tell you that, for instance, Fayette County, if we have any folks that are from Fayette, they have incentivized testing on employees. They pay for the testing, they provide the location, and the incentive is you get a half a day off. So they have an idea of where the staff are going to be coming in, and you don't have to guess after the fact. You don't have to wait for it. We've continued to advocate for preventative and mitigating measures, mask mandatory type requirements. Those things, I believe, will come. The problem is that at the very top, and this is the governor's seat that we're talking about, he's called us out several different times. Sure. And anecdotally and disingenuously use some of our documents against us. And I do want to back up and clarify, we have worked in a semi-close relationship with the State Department of Education through Clayton Birch, his support staff, the legal staff there. They have taken into account a lot of our questions, our concerns, and our guidelines in terms of forming the reentry guidelines and document. But I think it really, we go back to the original question: where is the enforcement? Where is the authority? And so that's what we're calling on, is that you need to make these things uniform so we can have these actions, because it's not confined. This virus is not confined to imaginary districts, lines, county makeups. This thing is as fluid as you can imagine. And for instance, right now, Logan County, when you compare the population, the demographics, the critical mass and location of people of Logan County compared to, say, for a Kanawha County, a Mon County, a Jefferson, Berkeley County, they don't compare in population. But look at the issues that they're now facing, and that's because there's nobody at the helm to say masks are required. You can't have these certain social functions, whether that's religious or otherwise, and if you do, you've got to do X, Y, and Z. So not everybody's chipping in, and so without that clear authority, we don't want our people to gamble. We don't want this to be a roll of the dice for our students, for the parents. And this is an issue that is paramount. Just look at the data. Don't put politics into it. Just look at the data. West Virginia is an old population. West Virginia is an unhealthy population. Those two factors are key in saying, are they at risk? And I don't know what it's like in the EP because I haven't pulled that data, but I can tell you in Kanawha County, we're talking 50% plus of the student population are raised by grandparents. And second time around is pretty common in West Virginia because of systemic issues of poverty, opioid issues. So we're talking about this is a disaster waiting to happen, but we can do this properly, but they have to invest. So what we have asked for, and we don't have a track on, is county by county what the supplies are for the PPE, what they will supply, how they mandate it, the sanitization, the professional development that is incorporated with this. Because folks, when you talk about a classroom teacher and our service personnel, they've already been asked to do so much in terms of education, and we're going to add this on top of it, and then and say, well, and we've got to do instruction. So, we can't do this alone. I think there are people pulling in the same direction that do have the same concerns, but we can't make this political. This has to be science and fact driven, and we have to advocate. We have to yell and scream at the local level and make those echoes go all the way to Charleston and beyond. And so that's why I said, Sammy and Brittany, this. When I say grassroots matter, that's how we advocate. That's how we know. We can't go based on anecdotal information and hearsay. Give us the details, give us the facts, and we can take care of it here.
And with that, Chris, thank you so much for coming on with us. If you will stand by, just in case we do have a few questions,
sure.
We'd love to have you. And then I want to make sure that we share those resources. But, Brittany and I are very much in agreement, especially when it comes to mobilization. It is going to be on us as a community. And regardless of where you are in this state at this point, it is going to be our collective voices that really lift up how this is going to be implemented. BB?
Yeah, I just kept thinking about what Chris said about not being uniform. It felt very much that, the governor wanted to make everything, local control, which sounds good until you realize that, you're forcing people to, like Chris said, deal with something unprecedented. And then to come in last second and decide, just kidding, there is this uniform rule that I plagiarized from somewhere, which as former English teacher, pretty big deal. And yeah, so it's felt very sudden and confusing, and like everything we tried to build undermined in an instant. So yeah, thank you so much, Chris. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris. Hang in there with us.
Thank you all very, very much.
All right. Okay, so next up, for folks tuning into the live, we're going to transition into our higher ed portion. So we've got two folks from Shepherd University that we're going to bring on to the live. We've got Dr. Hanahan. Please say hello. And then,
There.
hello. And then Barbie Candalis, bring her on.
Here I am.
Hello. All right, ladies, welcome on to the live. You're in the hot seat now.
I'm gonna let Heidi start.
Yeah,
Dear.
So I want to make sure that folks know exactly who you are. Both of you are a very big deal to me as an alum from Shepherd, and both had a pretty key role in my own experience. So I'm very biased. And if I do your introduction, it'll sound like rainbows and butterflies. So go ahead and tell the folks who you are, and we'll get into the conversation.
Okay, I'm Dr. Heidi Hanrahan. I teach at Shepherd in the Department of English and Modern Languages since 2007. I'm also the president of the Faculty Senate. I overlapped with Sammy towards the end of her career at Shepherd. She used to wave to me and we'd talk when she was on her way to her classes. Even then, I knew she was a star. So I'm happy to be here and join this conversation.
Thank you. All right.
Well, I'm Barb Candalis, and I'm a graduate of Shepherd University. I work as a program assistant in the Academic Community Outreach Office, and we do a lot of work with the schools and the counties. We organize the dual enrollment program where we bring high schoolers into Shepherd where they take classes. And Sammy and I go way back. We are sisters. We are sisters in a sense. And so I'm just really happy to be here and give my my knowledge on how this is all affecting Shepherd with bringing high school students in and having that aspect also in addition to our undergraduate and graduate students.
Thank you both. So Shepherd's already brought folks onto campus. We've got folks moved in. We start classes on Monday.
Yeah.
We just heard a little bit from Chris about the policy itself that is re-entry. What's it look like for both of you now that you've had to implement and you're getting incoming freshmen? This is their first time setting a foot on campus. This is their new adult experience. What are we doing?
I mean, I can't. I can speak for from a faculty member's perspective, and from what I've been doing is sort of rethinking everything. I think our challenges in higher ed are in so many ways much easier than the K-12 level. But it means, I've been thinking about access to technology for students if we go remote, questions of equity, making instruction available. We've been thinking about safety measures. I spent about an hour today putting signs on chairs in classrooms to number them. That's the kind of stuff we're doing. We're doing Shepherd gets it done. We're doing everything we can with the resources we have. And that pause there is significant, with the resources we have. So that's a beginning of an answer. I don't know if Barb wants to add anything to it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's, I think our vice presidents and our president, our whole administrative staff, they've just been, throwing down the gauntlet, as I say, trying to get campus safe for our students coming in. We had just went through a round of COVID testing for our students and our faculty and staff, and even our dual enrollment students who are going to be coming in, our high school students. So, and like Heidi said, we've just been, outfitting buildings with signs for entry and exit and masks and hand sanitizer, the whole 9 yards. My daughter's an RA on campus.
Yes.
So I've been kind of getting that end of it also with our resident students, and we have students who are, out at the Clarion Hotel so that we have plenty of space for all of our students. And they are doing everything they can in the residence halls to make sure that these students are safe. Usually it's one to a room, unless they want to have a roommate and they've requested that. So we, she, in her training over the last 2 weeks, they've just been inundated with knowledge of COVID and how it's, what will happen if there is a positive test, and how they will quarantine, and how they will trace it. So I think everybody's really on top of it. I know the students are just super excited to be on campus. I mean, they just want to start their education and have amazing professors and faculty like Dr. Hanrahan. They're just excited to get in there with her and start their, they just want to start their classes. They just want to do it. And so I think Shepherd has really, like she said, we've all come together. We've been working tirelessly. I mean, I've been working hours that I'm not even documenting, on a level, just to make sure that all of the dual enrollment students are educated. And Dr. Hicks, who I work really closely with, we're kind of a team in that, and just work, trying to make sure that they are prepared and knowing what to do, especially with coming from the high school where it may only be highly recommended to wear a mask. At Shepherd, it's required. So, and they know that. So,
sorry about the feedback. There's a few questions that come to mind for me right off the bat. One that Dr. Hanrahan brought up a little bit about equity and what it means to create access for all students. And that last component is, how do we, I guess, implement the campus mandate of mask wearing, knowing that culturally right now it's a divisive issue, which still boggles my mind, but it is. So how do we address both, which are very big top lines, to be frank with you, but also speak to a lot of the cultural dynamics in West Virginia, period, in our sweet little campus in Shepherdstown.
Yeah, I think we are lucky in that Shepherd people tend to be kind and respectful. And if we just say, you can't come in the room, I'm going to call security if you don't put your mask on, that kind of stuff, I think that will work. I did want to say, Barbie's right. I mean, no place I'd rather be than in person in my classroom with my students. Any day. Haven't been in a classroom with my students since March 13th. It hurts. However, we really have to think about what it means to go back. And while there are students who are happy to be back on campus, I think it's worth pointing out that Shepherd is also accommodating any student who feels that it isn't safe to go back, which means Shepherd faculty are teaching, in some ways, multiple sections of the same class to accommodate students. And that's an equity issue too, I think, and we're doing it without really complaining too much, because we want to guarantee a good education for our students who love this place, and we love them, and we want them to succeed. So these are just some of the issues that we're really thinking about. Everything from how do we make sure people have a mask when they're in the classroom, to how do I communicate with the student who is, a state away or the other side of this state and cannot be in my heavily discussion-based classrooms. How do we replicate that experience? Or, the student who lives maybe an hour away but has no internet service, in 2020. What do we do with that? It's a lot. It's a lot to take on. And again, couldn't ask for a better group of people to fight through these challenges with, but they are steep.
I believe it. And I know, just having been a student and I graduated twice over from Shepherd.
Yes.
But I know that we're kind of a scrappy crew.
That is my favorite word.
We make a lot happen with a
Mhm.
little, and it's because we really do love the community on campus. I mean, I still have those relationships clearly, but it does make me wonder, and I think about my own experience that I worked 2 jobs, 3 jobs
Mhm.
to pay for school, and what do we do for those students who that access isn't there now? They can't work 2 jobs to make ends meet.
Mhm.
I don't think they can do campus work. Can they? Can they do a work study at this point?
They are still doing work study. I think everything looks different.
Everything.
Everything looks different.
Yeah. So to pull that all together and then to make sure that you have the means to get your text, that you do
Mhm.
have internet access. My goodness, even a computer, you need a laptop.
Yeah, I mean, I worked with students over the summer who, because we did all of our advising over the summer for incoming students virtually, and I worked with students who only had a broken cell phone. You know, that was all they had, and they do not have the money for a computer. So we've been telling them look for CARES Act money and all of that. So it's a lot.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All right, let's talk about the mask mandate.
Yeah.
How?
Well, it's I think that that was something that they put into effect, importantly, so that everybody's safe. Um, I worked remotely for several months and then started slowly coming back onto campus, and it does weigh heavy, and having a mask, having everybody wear a mask, I mean, it makes me feel better, but it's not 100%. um
Mhm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
How do you feel? I mean, I don't know about the teaching end of it, because you have a mask on and you're trying to communicate with your students, and a lot of the expression and stuff that you get from your students that you're not going to see with the mask. So, I mean, I guess on a safety end of it, it's good, but I don't know about on the education side of it. So, how do you feel about that, Dr. Hanrahan?
Fortunately, I'm loud, so I'm not worried about that, and I am pretty expressive, but I think I'm pretty good at smizing, so I think that helps.
Oh, that's
But
nice.
I I am very worried about hearing my students. And in one of my classes is in Reynolds Hall, which is an old theater.
Yeah.
It's got 25 students in that space, and I'm not worried about them hearing me. I'm worried about hearing them. Um, we should say that something like mid 60% of our classes are either going to be online or hybrid,
Yeah.
but mine are all face to face. So that, if you're on the other end of the computer, you don't need a mask, but it will be a challenge. It will be a challenge too for people who have hearing impairments, who read lips. But we'll figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah, we did. I had a dual enrollment student who had a hearing impairment, and I worked closely with her dad and her, and she was signed up with one of our amazing English professors, and got them in contact with him. And he suggested that she go into his online section because she was worried that she wasn't going to be able to hear him, or vice versa. So I think everybody's working together and trying to find the best model that's going to work for each student. Because,
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
For both
that's
of
the
you,
amazing. Yeah. Mhm.
are you worried about how this would change that pretty critical growing up experience, that coming of age that happens when you come to college, when you come to our campus?
I mean, part of me says these students who are 20 something years younger than me, that's assuming, I mean, we get plenty of non-traditional students, but part of me is assuming, and saying, they're going to have great stories for future generations, and they've got plenty of years left and God willing, 3 more, new years to start off at Shepherd. So I guess I'm worried about some of that being lost, the mingling in the hallways, the social events and all of that. It does feel like it's going to be sadder and tougher and all of that. But the biggest fears, of course, are about safety. So
Yeah. Riley? Yeah.
Yep. Safety, I think, right now, I think, from a parent aspect too, I work in higher education and I'm a parent. It was hard taking my daughter and dropping her off as an RA and knowing that she's going to be, in charge of students, who, are possibly leaving home for the first time and having that independence and, not a lot of accountability on that end. So, but she was super excited. So I was super excited. And I think, we just have to.
I mean, how could you say no, right? Like
Right. You just have to. And another one of my friends, her son came, and it was hard for her to drop him off, but he's just, ready to go off to college, and so I'm hopeful that they'll be able to still have some of those social distancing type events, and be able to interact and that. So. But maybe it'll give them a little more time to study.
Yeah.
If they're not all out running around. I don't know. I'm just
for both of you. Before we close out our higher ed portion, I want to give you like a big shout out and a huge thank you. I think I'm scared for you. I can't help it, but it's a big deal to me to see you both and know that these students are in really great hands going back to a campus that I still love. I'm still in love with that place. So last question to close it all out. What can I do to help you?
I mean, the answer for anyone who's listening, the answer is testing, testing, testing. All of the experts are saying multiple times a week, everyone should be getting tested. We tested everyone Friday through Wednesday of this week. We need to keep testing. It's the only way to control this thing until we get a vaccine. So anything you can do, anyone to just make that argument. And then, just keep, we do a lot with a little at Shepherd, but anything you can get us, we will use it the right way. So, yeah. And wash your hands, right? So
wash your damn hands.
Yeah. Right? And stop doing this. I can't. I'm always touching my face.
I know. That's why I'm here, social distancing, So
yeah.
For both of you, thank you so much. It means a lot that you came on tonight. So we're gonna kick it to K through 12. BB, how do you feel so far?
Woo! Great. These are my people. One thing we didn't acknowledge is that all of those incoming freshmen in college, they all got a congratulation letter from Governor Justice.
Right, just now.
Yeah, all graduating high school seniors. Yeah, just like this week got a letter from him. That was really thoughtful. That's the word I'm going to use. I'm going to be nice tonight. Nice.
So we're about to kick it. Look at these faces. We're about to kick it into some pretty contentious territory. So I know that I was going to need backup for this section. And I'm going to kick off this whole conversation with, currently the BOE, they're meeting remote, ironically, to discuss everyone coming in to their brick and mortar facilities. I might just leave it at that.
But, JJ, press conference is also close to the media, right?
So we have this dynamic right now where we're seeing one end of the spectrum, which is about the leadership and the folks that are implementing this quote unquote policy, and then we have the folks that are on the front lines actually doing the educating, actually doing the interacting. And they were also the last ones to be consulted, if at all. So I want to kick it to you. Let's introduce the folks on our K through 12 panel.
Yeah, Robin, why don't you go first? Tell us who you are, where you teach, what you do.
Okay. I'm Robin Cutlip. I teach at Webster County High School. I'm currently running for House of Delegates in my district of 44. So wish me luck there.
Woohoo!
Last year, I started teaching careers in education. So I have high school students that want to become teachers. So thankfully, my classrooms, it's pretty small. I think the biggest one I had last year was 15 students. So I'll be able to social distance them pretty well. But the other classes, it is scary how it's going to work. Our county, I really believe that our county has really put out a safe plan, probably the safest that I think that we could do across the state. Several counties I've noticed are doing the same one. But the kids come in different groups. So on Monday and Tuesday, we'll have group A. On Wednesday is we clean the school, we get ready for the next group coming in, and we prepare lessons to do for virtual. And then Thursday and Friday, group B comes in. So the 3 days that the students are at home, then they're supposed to do virtual learning. A lot of our students, we live in Webster County in the mountains. Our students do not have internet. So they are going to open up a few hot spots across the county. But we also ordered iPads. So every student in the county, even if you have 5 kids in your home, all 5 kids get an iPad. They have not came in yet, so cross your fingers. So that was ordered. They were ordered early in the summer, and we still have not seen them yet. But every student will receive an iPad, and the app that we're getting to use on the iPad, they do not even have to have internet to be able to access the assignments. Okay. So once we're able to upload them, then they can get in and out of the assignment at any time on their own. So every morning, the students will have their temperatures checked. I know the professor at Shepherd talked about testing. Well, the teachers did ask about that. And unfortunately, our school system does not believe that testing is the right way to go. They think that, they've really been advised from the health department that it's not the best way to go because, they told our schools that if you get tested on Monday morning, it'll take you 2 to 3 days to get the results back. You could become infected within that time period of waiting, and when you get your test result back, you do have COVID, but you've already been out and about for those 3 days thinking you didn't have it. So,
but
it's
you would have it anyways, whether you were tested or not, isn't that
right?
Okay.
Yeah, they're saying that that they think it is a waste. I believe it's money. We're talking about money. Here's what it is. But they're saying that if your test result would come back positive, but within those days of you waiting to get that test result, you were exposed. So make that a little more clear. I mean, it makes sense, but still, I think if we were tested, at least once a week, at least the teachers. I mean, I can see not making the students be tested, but at least the teachers. But that is not an option. So every morning, the teachers, staff, and students will have their temperatures checked. But my biggest concern is our bus drivers. They're the first to be exposed with anything, even when we do not have, an epidemic going on. They're the first in line every morning, and they will not have any protections at all. They cannot have the plexiglass around them on the bus. The students will not have their temperatures checked before they get on the bus. And even though our classroom sizes should be cut in half, our bus routes probably will not be. So, you're going to have a bus driver that's exposed to 20 to 30 students at least every single morning. So, cross your fingers for our bus drivers. They're really putting themselves out there, and they have no way to really protect themselves except for with the mask. And of course, the students, it's recommended they get on the bus with a mask. But who's going to make sure that that happens? Because it's just the bus driver, and he can't pull over in the middle of a curve to scream and make sure that the mask gets put back on. So our bus drivers are on the front line this time for sure. So keep them in mind when we go back.
Wow.
Thanks for sharing, Robin.
Yeah. Next up, we've got Wilson Harvey. Tell them who you are, my friend.
Absolutely. Hey, y'all. Thanks for having me on, and good evening, everybody. I'm Wilson Harvey, and I am a social emotional learning specialist at Buchanan Upshur High School in Upshur County. And I'll be brief here just to start. We've been back in for a week, and like Robin, I would say our county's plan, after long periods of development and discussion with the board, I think it's gotten to a place where it's a pretty safe plan, in as much as it can be safe to reenter. We're very similar to what you said, Robin, except for it's a Monday, Thursday, Tuesday, Friday cohort plan. And one move I know that our county, and I believe many counties are starting to make, this is similar to what was said earlier with Shepherd, is they're looking at the ideas of doing remote schooling instead of virtual at the county level, which then doubles up sort of what's expected of teachers there, because then the idea with remote is that they are preparing those lessons, which has certainly a benefit to it, that if a student decides to come back into school, they keep their spot in the class. But obviously it also has a lot of additional strain, on teachers.
And I just want to cut in for a second, Wilson. I think a good point to make too is that we still don't know if that's going to be required of teachers. And we're coming up on 2 weeks out from a school year when teachers spend their whole summer developing their school plans. And this has been a mystery. What, teaching all online and teaching all in person and teaching a hybrid, all three of those are very different. So yeah.
Absolutely. And I go back, just when I look at this at the state level, I came last year I worked in Manassas, Virginia. And Prince William County, many counties in Virginia, they made their decision that they've stuck with about a month and a half ago. And you talk about being allowed to make decisions at the county level, they were allowed to make that decision there. And then they've stuck with that. And so they've worked for all that time preparing it. But we continue to see in our state the bar moving. I've tried to have some back and forth with Dr. Marsh, with Dr. Amjad, and I'm thankful for them being open. And as I've looked at what COVID is, it's just very apparent to me. We can't think of school as a vacuum. Our schools exist in our communities, and even if kids are at less risk, they're still at risk. I believe we had our first case of an inflammation disorder with a young person just today that was released publicly with a kid that had been exposed to COVID. We also had to think, our state's numbers are good, and I've seen Dr. Marsh talk about how our percent positive right now, being under 3 consistently, is helpful in terms of that reopening, and it is. But we're not like a country that has sealed off our borders. We had done none of that, and we don't exist in a vacuum. We had another 43,000 positives today as a country, I believe, and we had a significant decline in testing nationally. So, and our neighbors are significantly struggling with this. So I think that we are living in a situation where there's a potential for lives to be lost or significantly altered. And from my perspective as a social emotional specialist, well, I know there's trauma that comes certainly from the quarantine, that comes from that situation. This is what they call a wicked problem in sociology. There's no good answer to it. But in my mind, the best answer is the one that keeps people from losing their lives: kids, parents, grandparents, people in the community.
Mm-hmm. That seems to be the bottom line for sure. let's kick it to our next guest, shall we? Storm, tell them who you are, my friend.
Hi,
Hey
Storm.
guys, I'm Storm Frame. I'm actually running for the House of Delegates this year in the 65th District, and I'm a teacher in Jefferson County Schools. It's why I'm running for office in the 66th District, because we need change. But I will say in Jefferson County, we're still at a 5-day go to school every day plan. And I am worried. I want to kick it back to what Chris Mallory was saying, which was the lack of leadership and the constantly passing on the buck to somebody else. So our superintendent here in Jefferson County is supportive, and she, I think, I don't want to speak for her, but we all know that it seems to be safer at home. And yet, she's been told over and over from the West Virginia Department of Ed and the governor that the governor is the only one that can make that decision. Yet he spoke on Friday and very clearly said on Friday that local school boards and superintendents could make that decision based on their local data and their local what they wanted, to see locally, and that's not the case. So it's frustrating for all of us as teachers, as educators. I agree with Robin. Bus drivers are the first ones. They don't get to check temperatures. They have to transport the children to our schools. We used the thermometer this week. I'm a volleyball coach, and we started practice on Monday. The thermometers that they purchased for our schools don't work. So the athletic department had to go out and buy their own thermometer because the one that they purchased for every school that's supposed to work doesn't. So there are definitely concerns, a lot of them. And, I have 4 children, and one thing I will say that I am appreciative of in Jefferson County is that instead of going through the West Virginia Department of Ed virtual school, they created a Jefferson Virtual Academy. Now, we have no idea who's going to be teaching that yet, because that registration just ended yesterday. But I did sign my 4 children up for virtual school. They'll be attending classes with unknown teachers at this point. But I just felt it was the safest decision. So I don't know. I'm with, again, Brittany, that, here we are. We're supposed to be welcoming students on September 8th, and there's just so many unknowns. So that's the state of education from my book.
I think something that you said is like you have to make decisions like as a parent and as a teacher. Mm-hmm. And that makes it like twice as hard. Plus you can see it from both ends, like how frustrating it is for you, like not knowing how or what method you're going to use to teach this year, but also like how your kids are going to learn and who's going to be teaching them. It really highlights that like there's 2 sides of it, of like how horrifyingly frustrating it is when we could have, like, everything that's being in place today, like we could have seen in March and April. Like we could have at least said this will exist in some capacity, in all 3 of these capacities in March. Let's start working. And yet we're, like I said, almost 2 weeks from school starting, and we still don't know what we're doing.
Yeah. And I will speak up and say also that we're really fortunate in our family that we have someone who can work from home with the children, because Ebony and I both work in the school system, and we don't have that option. Even if we do go remote, we've been told that we have to report to the school in order to teach remotely. So,
Can we talk about how that's also like not treating professionals like professionals? I have a lot of feelings on that.
We're we're about to get to that, but let me kick it to our last guest on the panel, Ms. Priscilla, if you'll tell them who you are, my dear friend. Oh, unmute. There we go.
I'm sorry. I taught in Jefferson County. I left for 2 years, and then I'm coming back this year to teach. I have 3 children in the Jefferson County schools. One thing particular for me is I have a heart condition. I have a pacemaker, and I had heart failure. So for me, I'm still waiting to hear if I will have a medical accommodation, my medical accommodation met. My medical accommodation is that I want the students, I'm teaching a self-contained group of 2nd to 5th graders. And my cardiologist said to me, John Hopkins cardiologist, she's like, it's crazy to go into a classroom with students without masks. That's just, basic. And so that's my accommodation. But I'm worried. I'm worried that they'll say, no, you can't have your kids wear masks, which to me, and I feel like, the whole idea that we can't make kids do things, when school is pretty much all about making kids do things, let's face it, they're learning to line up, they're learning to, tie their shoes. I think we can teach them to wear a mask. And that doesn't mean there can't be breaks and all sorts of other things. But so that's one thing for me. We're also lucky because my husband is a Loudoun County teacher. And they're doing all virtual. So our children are all going to do virtual too, because we're trying to get the exposure levels down in our family. Right. And Jefferson is doing 5-day in person. There are no caps on class sizes. Well, I think they put out like 25. If you're with your core group, you don't have to wear a mask, so they have all these things that I consider sort of like, where's your line in the sand? For me, my line in the sand is we've got to have less kids in the classroom so we can socially distance. Well, if you have a full school, full classrooms, they're not going to be able to socially distance. And the kids have to wear masks. Those to me, that's like the 2 things. We got to get our numbers down. And because they aren't staggering and they aren't requiring masks with you when you're with your core group, the group that you're supposed to kind of mostly stay with, I'm like, that's just not safe. I wouldn't put myself in that situation. So why would I think that it's safe to put my children in that situation? So I don't think our county is doing a great job, to be honest. I don't. And I don't like it. I wish, like, I've been watching a lot of the board meetings, all the last 5 or 6 board meetings. And, because they're virtual, not many people are getting a chance to speak. They've done these AFT surveys where it shows that all the teachers are worried. They're never brought up. None of the board members are really speaking up against the plan. So I'm kind of confused by the lack of conversation. They keep saying, oh, you send in your questions, but I'm like, where? You say this is a draft, but the draft seems done from day one. The draft seems sort of done. There wasn't really like, what about staggering? What about masks? So in a way, I'm sort of in the weird sort of flip where I keep hoping Justice will come up with more strict plans to make our county safer.
Right.
Just for all my friends and family. I'm lucky because I'm going to have a self-contained class. So it's going to be a pretty small number. And if I get my accommodation, that'll feel pretty safe. But for so many friends and families, I don't feel like it's a really safe, opening. I get it that they're trying. I think there's a lot of concern about the kids who are at home, but I feel like, we also have to really make sure things are safe. So that's kind of where I'm at with it.
Yes, ma'am. There's a few questions, and I know I technically should not keep y'all too much longer, but in particular, let's start with the fact that as educators, how are you coping with the fact that there seems to be a lot of inconsistency and a lot of juxtaposition in your job at this point? There's a great point on here where it says we have to implement a dress code, but we can't implement mask policy. There's another really great comment around, it is very much part of our lot and what we want to be as far as educators and mentors to take care of the well-being of students, but then are we actually doing that by having them in the classroom 5 days a week? So where do we reconcile all of these seeming it's all hypocritical at this point? So how are we doing that?
I feel like for me, I just kind of have to keep my, my eyes on the feet in front of me. You know what I mean? Like what's the next step? Mm-hmm. And the next step, you know what I mean, just is kind of like, I mean, to a certain degree where, we can ask for our accommodations, we can do it. But there's also just like, I'm like, I have to figure out a way that I can have 10 children have hooks in my room to spread out all their stuff so their stuff doesn't touch and their water bottles don't touch. And I have to tape down my floor so I can know what 6 feet looks like apart. And everything, all the math manipulatives have to be in their own little boxes. So there's so much stuff that you have to do once you get in the classroom to try to prepare it. That's all at this point, that's kind of what I've decided what I'm going to do with my children. And right now I'm just going to try to make my space as safe as possible. I don't know how other people are handling it.
Yeah. Guys, tell me about it.
Same. And I think that, there is definitely a concern, but the West Virginia Department of Health and Human Resources just put out some statistics this past week that showed that, although teachers do contribute a lot of the CPS reports, only about 11% of them are found to be needing investigation. And even fewer than that are cause of concern. And their, recommendation was that hopefully, because people are, of course, we're all extraordinarily stressed right now, but maybe there's less abuse because of the focus on other issues. So I don't know. But my second thing that I wanted to say is my best friend is a healthcare worker. And so, of course, she's been essential and she's been working this whole time. And I love her dearly. And I am very, very grateful for all of the essential workers that have continued to work during this pandemic. But, she went to school and for this reason, so that she could be around sick people. And she signed up for that. And she knew that she was going to, see and have the trauma of sickness and death. And teachers did not. And that's, I think, what's been weighing on my heart all summer as we go on is that I know a lot of students who live with their grandparents, their elderly, sick grandparents. And I just, nobody wants that on their conscience, right? That we were around each other for, an hour and a half at a time because we're doing block schedule. So, and I was the reason, or I didn't wipe down the handle good enough, or I didn't space them out long enough, or I didn't, there's just so many things to think about. And, so, it's heavy burden. So just keep us in your thoughts and prayers as we go on and the week goes on. And, we try to figure out and go through and navigate these, uncharted waters, as we'd call them.
The thing that I think of most, particularly for you, Storm, is you are a mom, then you're trying to implement a curriculum, then you're also now taking on a duty that you weren't necessarily equipped to do by adhering to public health standards. Then on top of that, you're now an online educator as well. So you have multiple jobs all at the same time. And what's crazy about that is you're not the only one. It's as if when we have these conversations, folks forget that educators are parents and grandparents too.
Yeah.
Amazing to me. Let me kick it up top to Wilson and Robin. What are your thoughts?
You know what? I'll say something real quick. First of all, you mentioned just sort of the piece of, as teachers, we're not trained or equipped equipped for a public health crisis. And it kind of reminds me, I think it's not uncommon for teachers to be asked to do things that are beyond our purview. I mean, everybody remembers when, I don't remember where this was. What was it? Where they wanted to give teachers buckets of rocks to defend against school shootings, you know? And so I think that I believe in teachers, and I believe that we will do our best to help protect our kids. I come at this, what motivates me, you know, as I've gone into our office, you know, I have asthma. I'm at risk. My parents are at risk. And I'm aware, you know, that I'm going to have to be careful with them. I'm aware, you know, that I'm going to have to be careful with everyone around me in regard to this. I'm a football coach. I know that brings on added risk if we have our season. But I look at this, I care very, very deeply about the students that I work with. I want to make sure that they get what they need. And yet there's another part of me that says they're not going to get what they need if they or their parents or their grandparents aren't alive or are dealing with significant respiratory issues, if they end up on a ventilator. And that's why I'm here tonight. Because it is my responsibility, at least in my role as an SEL specialist and formerly as a school counselor, ethically speaking, to make sure that I do everything I can to make sure my students are safe in our building and as much as possible beyond. I never thought that I would have to do that in a global pandemic. That wasn't really, when I read the ASCA Code of Ethics, what I anticipated. But that's where we are. And I would say that it speaks tremendously to the incredible nature of teachers and of teachers in West Virginia, that we've seen so much advocacy. And we deserve to be able to advocate for ourselves, but also advocacy too for kids, for parents, for communities, for grandparents. It's a testament, I think, to the caring heart that we see of teachers in West Virginia. And so I agree with Storm. Keep us certainly in your thoughts and your prayers as we move forward, you know, and speak up, because we want to make sure that your kids are safe. And we want to make sure that our colleagues and our communities are safe.
Perfect. Robin Cutlett, take us home.
Just like everyone said, I mean, you know, you may have 2 or 3 children of your own, but when we become teachers, every student in that classroom becomes ours. So, you know, I have a whole lot of children in Webster County, and I care about each of them just like I do my own. So I can't imagine, like Storm said, if one of them would get COVID and take it home to their grandparent or their parents or their siblings or themselves. I mean, I just hope that parents out there understand that it's not because we are lazy, because, oh Lord, virtual learning is 10 times harder than in classroom learning.
Yeah.
It's, you know, not fun. It's not hands-on. It's not goofing off. It's sitting in front of a computer. It's not exciting. So I hope that parents understand that when we are advocating for our jobs, we're advocating for them and our kids also, because they are our kids and we care deeply about them. And I could not imagine losing one of them. It would be like losing one of my own. So the whole school would be devastated. The whole county would be devastated. So I cannot imagine losing a young person to this because we decided to go back when we were not ready. So again, just keep us in your thoughts and prayers, and understand that teachers really do care, and we will do everything we can to keep those kids safe when they are with us.
And just real quick, if I can add, from the SEL standpoint, the social emotional, there is trauma with every option, but that's the trauma. Another kid or a teacher or somebody in the community, that's trauma we can't fix or get back from, you know.
For the 4 of you, thank you so much for coming on and just sharing your thoughts with me and really for all the folks that tune in across the state and beyond to hear about what's going on in our classrooms. And I want to say that I specifically opened this conversation in this way because you were the last to be consulted about a plan that affected you, your classrooms, your profession, and then clearly children and families that you deeply love. So this was an attempt to bring your voices forward and give you some sort of equity in a space that you more than deserve it. So thank you. I really can't thank you enough, and I'm nervous for you. Please stay safe out there, okay?
Thank you.
Brittany Bartlett, me and you, let's wrap this thing up.
I'd like to say they slayed it. I mean, those are my K-12 people, so Shepherd might be scrappy, but K-12 is pretty scrappy. Kind of got it. But I wanted to highlight on what Robin just said about there's like this perception that teachers are like lazy or cowards or, well, what about the whataboutism? We've seen a lot of that about, well, what about these essential workers and those essential workers? Like they shouldn't have gone through that either. And teachers have been, we've organized after 2018 where, we understand the organizing world better than we ever did before. And so now we understand how to organize around those issues. And I saw my teacher friends, all of my, my friends in education who were some of the first people to loudly proclaim that we shouldn't be sending people back to these jobs in the front line because it's a lot of our freshly graduated kids that are filling those roles. Robin's saying they're all her kids. Like I ran into a former student that I haven't seen in probably 3 years. She took a brand new job at a gas station. And when I walked in to see her, I was like, where is your mask? You need to be wearing a mask and your boss should be telling you to wear a mask and you should get one. And if you need me, you call me. They're like always your kids.
Always.
But that's it. Like we're not lazy. We're not cowards. Teaching online is hard. We do drills where we literally, prepare to take bullets for kids. So teachers aren't cowards. And the second thing is like talking about all those, like a thermometer that doesn't even work, all the things we can put in place to help. All of this could be flushed away in like 1 week. Like all of this money we've put into like the temporary things to make us feel good about going back could just be gone as it's happened across the country, higher ed and K-12, that we did all this and we spent all this for nada. So we should be preparing more for just the inevitability that at least a good chunk of our state is going to have to go remote very quickly based on our new, what'd you call it, the red light, green light?
Red light, green light.
Red light, green light.
I'll tell you, one of my biggest arguments, especially in the beginning of this, when we first got home from session, is that it was very clear that folks weren't taking this seriously. In fact, I remember distinctly, I will never forget this, when Isaac Spinagle, he proposed his amendment to make sure that we had some sort of line item budget for COVID. We were laughed at. Folks said that we were fear mongering. And of course, it got voted down. Now, mind you, later on, you see in the threads that they're like, Isaac didn't even ask for enough money. At least you asked for something.
Yeah.
At least there was somebody that was looking out for public health. So now we're, fast forward several months, and we're thinking about, how we're reintegrating into this new normal, except for we never addressed the systemic issues to begin with. And what COVID did was really expose the underbelly. All of those issues, they're not new issues. They've been here all along. You just can't hide from them anymore in the state of West Virginia. And what are we doing to address them still? I think about this, and we've got educators going back into the classroom, but we never fully funded PEIA. We had an opportunity to implement paid family leave during the session. The bill didn't even see the floor. You know, item after item where we could have actually taken care of the people of West Virginia, that we could have set it up so that this is a reality. We can bring people back into the classroom. We can have a fully functioning economy. It didn't happen. And then here we are still sitting on CARES Act money and not implementing it for the people of West Virginia. Some of the questions that I saw in the thread, and Brittany, I know we're gonna have to do a part 2. Are you down?
Yeah, part 2.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do a part 2, but I'm seeing these, and the glaring theme is that there's inequity, there's inconsistency, and there's no leadership.
Perfect summary.
That said, let's call it a night, my friend. Thank you so
All
much
right.
for
Thank you.
doing this with me. I know we're going to do a part 2 for the state of education, but that said, I'm Delegate Sammy Brown, and it seems like we've made a show out of the weekly panel. We're going to cover the top stuff. This week it was education. We'll be back at it. And I want to give a special shout out and thank you to all of our educators that finally were consulted about the reentry plan. Everyone in West Virginia, love you very much. The movement moves because of you, and we will see you in 1 week's time.
Good.